on stolen land, you drink stolen water, you eat stolen fruit. I find you fascinating, Mr. Dayan. I really do. I can't understand how you have such self-assurance. A man who was born in Argentina, whose family comes from the Ukraine, and is actually wanting people, sensible people, to believe that he has some connection with my country. You and your fellow settlers, nothing other than common thieves.
You're listening to This Week in Palestine, a space where truth is unflinching, resistance is sacred, and solidarity is non-negotiable. Hear voices from the heart of occupation rise to meet global movements demanding justice, dignity, and liberation. Each week, we bring you fearless reporting, incisive analysis, and reflections that center Palestinian life in all its depth, defiance, and humanity. We examine the machinery of empire, from the policies that suffocate to the propaganda that distorts, and trace its reverberations across borders, connecting Ferguson to Jenin, refugee camps to classrooms, and Gaza to the global conscience. A brief note: the views expressed during this hour belong to our hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of WZBC, Boston College, or its Board of Trustees. This is not a space for polite avoidance or sanitized sound bites. It is a space for truth, bold, urgent, and unapologetic. We're honored you're here. Let's begin.
You are listening to This Week in Palestine, Truth and Justice Radio. Good morning, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Thank you for being here. I'm your host, Yara Rashid, and it's a deep and humbling honor to welcome you back to This Week in Palestine. Today is Sunday, September 14, 2025. Once again, our focus returns to Gaza and the West Bank, lands under siege, where homes lie in ruins, lives are uprooted, and voices struggle to rise above the noise of global indifference. As headlines fade and attention shifts, the truth remains. Families endure relentless displacement, communities resist with unshakable resolve, and the pursuit of dignity continues against staggering odds. Excuse me. And still, one question echoes through the silence. How long must a people suffer before the world chooses conscience over convenience, action over apathy? Stay with us as we strip away the silence, uplift resilience, and carry forward the flame of justice. This journey is not mine alone. It's ours. It's shared. It's urgent. And it's sacred.
So here's what's unfolding right now. What many won't say out loud, but what the world is beginning to see with clarity. Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government are facing growing international isolation. From Latin America to South Africa, from student unions to global human rights bodies, the tide is turning. The mask of democracy is slipping, and the reality of apartheid, occupation, and genocide is being called out for what it is. Even Israelis themselves are feeling the shift. As they travel abroad, many are choosing not to disclose their citizenship, not out of pride, but out of fear. The Israeli passport, once seen as a symbol of Western alignment, is now met with scrutiny, protest, and moral outrage. The truth is undeniable. Israel has become one of the most widely condemned regimes in the world. Oh, but let me pause and correct myself. That condemnation doesn't extend to our administration or to the members of Congress who continue to bow to AIPAC and the interests of the Israeli lobby. While the world demands accountability, many of our elected officials still offer blank checks and standing ovations. They bend the knee, Not to justice, not to peace, but to power and profit. This is not just a foreign policy failure, it's a moral crisis. And on college campuses, where truth should be pursued and justice should be taught, we must ask, what does it mean when our institutions remain silent? What does it mean when our tuition dollars, our endowments, and our student governments are complicit in genocide? We are not here to be polite. We are here to be principled, to speak truth, to organize, to divest, to disrupt the machinery of occupation wherever it hides, whether in weapons contracts, study abroad programs, or political endorsements.
AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, is one of the most influential lobbying organizations in the United States, dedicated to strengthening U.S. Israel relations by shaping foreign policy, securing military aid, and promoting legislation that aligns with Israeli government interests. Founded in 1954, AIPAC operates legally as a domestic nonprofit under U.S. law, which allows it to lobby without registering as a foreign agent under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA. Though it does not directly donate to political candidates, AIPAC exerts enormous influence through affiliated PACs and super PACs that spend millions supporting pro-Israel politicians and targeting critics of Israeli policy. It also sponsors trips to Israel for lawmakers, curates briefings, and mobilizes pressure campaigns to ensure bipartisan support for Israeli interests. That makes it clear that AIPAC functions as a de facto agent of a foreign government, shielding Israel from accountability and silencing dissent, while its continued access to Congress and the White House reflects the deep entanglement of U.S. politics with Israeli lobbying power.
You are listening to This Week in Palestine, Truth and Justice Radio.
AIPAC's grip on American politics is beginning to show cracks, though it remains formidable. For decades, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee has wielded outsized influence by funneling millions into campaigns, shaping foreign policy, and ensuring bipartisan loyalty to Israeli interests. But the landscape is shifting. Recent reports show that public opinion is turning. A majority of Americans now oppose unconditional military aid to Israel, especially in the wake of the Gaza genocide and mounting war crimes allegations. Even within Congress, some lawmakers, once backed by AIPAC, are distancing themselves. Representative Valerie Fouché, for example, received over $3 million in AIPAC-aligned support in 2022, but by 2024, she boycotted Netanyahu's congressional address and began shifting her stance. Younger voters, progressive candidates, and grassroots movements are increasingly viewing AIPAC's money as a political liability rather than a badge of legitimacy. Still, AIPAC's machinery is deeply embedded. It operates legally under U.S. lobbying laws, and its affiliated PACs continue to pour money into races to block pro-Palestinian voices and prop up candidates who toe the line. The Biden administration and many in Congress remain loyal, not necessarily out of conviction, but out of political calculation and donor pressure. So, what's next? AIPAC won't disappear overnight, but its influence is being challenged by shifting demographics, growing awareness, and a rising generation that refuses to trade justice for campaign checks. The question isn't whether AIPAC will lose power. It's when enough people will demand that our lawmakers serve conscience, not cash. Guy Christensen recently released a provocative video titled "Welcome to the United States of Israel," a sharp critique of the growing entanglement between American political institutions and the interests of the Israeli government. In the video, Christensen argues that U.S. governance has been procedurally influenced, if not outright captured, by a foreign apartheid regime, referring to Israel's policies toward Palestinians. Through a critical lens, he explores how American foreign policy, legislative priorities, and even media narratives increasingly reflect Israel's geopolitical goals, often at the expense of U.S. public interest, democratic accountability, and moral clarity. This isn't just about foreign policy, it's about the erosion of sovereignty. The video challenges viewers to confront how deep this influence runs, from the billions in unconditional military aid to the silencing of dissent on college campuses, from the normalization of apartheid to the distortion of truth in mainstream media. It asks us to consider whether our democracy is being shaped by domestic values or outsourced to a foreign agenda. And I want to echo that challenge, because what we're witnessing isn't just lobbying, it's control. Through AIPAC and its affiliated PACs, Israel's interests are not only steering our foreign policy, but infiltrating our daily lives. When an ambassador sits on screen and repeats debunked propaganda, stories of beheaded babies and mass rapes that even Israeli media has walked back on, we are not just dealing with misinformation, we are watching the machinery of influence in real time. Mike Huckabee, your performance was not just shameless, it was dangerous. How did you become an ambassador? Perhaps the answer lies in the corridors of AIPAC, where loyalty to Israel is rewarded more than loyalty to truth. So, I urge you, watch the video, reflect on it, write back your comments to me. I promise to respond. Because this conversation matters. Not just for Palestine, but for the soul of our democracy. Just last year, AIPAC and its affiliated super PACs spent over $100 million in a sweeping campaign to reshape Congress and punish lawmakers who refused to endorse genocide or who stood firmly with Palestine and Gaza. This wasn't just about influencing policy, it was about silencing dissent and maintaining control over the U.S. government. Among the primary targets were members of the progressive wing of Congress and others who dared to speak truth to power. Representative Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, Democrat, repeatedly smeared and challenged for her outspoken criticism of Israeli human rights abuses. Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, Democrat, the only Palestinian American in Congress who has called Israel's actions genocide and apartheid. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Democrat, criticized for supporting a ceasefire and opposing unconditional military aid. Representative Cori Bush of Missouri, Democrat, introduced resolutions demanding accountability and a halt to U.S. weapons transfers to Israel. Representative Jamaal Bowman of New York, Democrat, faced a well-funded primary challenger backed by AIPAC after shifting toward a more pro-Palestinian stance. Representative Summer Lee of Pennsylvania, Democrat, targeted for her refusal to endorse Israeli aggression and her calls for justice in Gaza. Representative Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, Democrat, joined calls for a ceasefire and was swiftly added to AIPAC's hit list.
Even Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, a Republican, was targeted for voting against pro-Israel resolutions, showing that AIPAC's reach crosses party lines. This campaign sent a chilling message: if you stand with Palestine, we will come for your seat. AIPAC poured millions into attack ads, primary challenges, and donor mobilization to drown out grassroots voices and ensure that Congress remains loyal, not to justice, but to the interests of a foreign apartheid regime. But resistance is growing. Movements like Reject AIPAC and campus divestment campaigns are pushing back, demanding that our lawmakers serve conscience, not campaign checks. The question isn't whether AIPAC's influence will be challenged, it's how soon we'll build the collective power to dismantle it.
Every congressman has a babysitter. That's not satire. It's a direct quote from Representative Thomas Massie of Kentucky, and it's a chilling glimpse into how deep the influence of AIPAC runs in Washington. In a 2024 interview with Tucker Carlson, Massie revealed that nearly every Republican in Congress has what he called an AIPAC babysitter, a designated individual, often a constituent embedded in AIPAC, whose job is to maintain constant contact with lawmakers, monitor their positions, and pressure them to vote in alignment with Israeli interests. These babysitters aren't casual supporters. They're part of a coordinated system of influence. They have lawmakers' personal cell numbers, schedule lunches in D.C., and act as unofficial handlers to ensure loyalty to a foreign government's agenda. Massie, one of the few Republicans who has openly defied AIPAC, said he banned the group from his office after they lobbied against his re-election and demanded he write a white paper on Israel during his first campaign. He described how colleagues often approach him on the House floor, saying they agree with his vote but fear backlash from their AIPAC arson. This isn't just lobbying, it's surveillance, it's political conditioning, and it's happening in plain sight. The fact that Massie is virtually alone in speaking out underscores how effective this system is. AIPAC doesn't just influence votes, it controls access, shapes careers, and punishes dissent. And when lawmakers are afraid to vote their conscience because of a babysitter assigned by a foreign-aligned lobby, we have to ask, whose democracy is this?
Let's turn now to Katie Halper and Aaron Mate on Useful Idiots, where sharp critique meets fearless journalism. In their latest episodes, they dive into a range of urgent topics, including the outsized influence of AIPAC on U.S. politics, the erosion of democratic accountability, and the machinery behind foreign policy decisions that shape our daily lives. Toward the end of their coverage, they feature a compelling segment from Representative Ro Khanna, who voices growing concern over Israel's actions in Gaza and calls for consequences rooted in human rights and international law. It's a moment of clarity in a landscape clouded by lobbyist pressure, and a reminder that truth still has a place in public discourse. These episodes aren't just commentary. They're a call to examine who holds power, how it's used, and what we must do to reclaim our voice.
On this week's show, we have Congressmember Ro Khanna. Now, last time he was on, I remember we sparred a little bit about the Ukraine proxy war, about sanctions on Syria. But it's a new era. We're living in the era of Israeli genocide, the moral issue of our time. And Ro Khanna has been on the front lines of fighting AIPAC. And so I say, let's let bygones be bygones. Whatever disagreements we have with Ro, let's put them aside. And I honor the stance he's taking in taking on the Israel lobby and taking on the Israel genocide. I also honor the fact that I think he's the only Democratic member of Congress willing to speak to podcasts that are to his left, to the left of the Democratic Party. So I give him a lot of credit for that, and we'll be speaking to him this week.
Thank you, Ro, for stopping by. And thank you, Ro, it is true, for actually speaking to people who don't always agree with you. Well, the world would be a better place if more politicians were like that.
All right, well, let's get to our 4 basic food groups. Democrats suck. And speaking to Democratic politicians, I once spoke to Senator Chris Coons on a train going from New York to D.C., and this was just about a month into the genocide. And I asked him why he was opposing calls for a ceasefire, and we had a interesting exchange that ended with him getting me kicked off the train. But anyway, now let's check out on Senator Chris Coons. What is his stance? Well, recently he voted against a measure from Bernie Sanders to block weapons to Israel. And how does he square that with the fact that he acknowledges that Israel is blocking humanitarian aid into Gaza? And under U.S. law, if you're doing that, then you cannot be receiving U.S. weapons. So has Senator Coons changed his stance? Let's check in. He was interviewed by PBS.
You called it urgent that Israel allow more humanitarian aid in.
Yes.
In July, you voted against a measure to halt the sale of $675 million of weaponry to Israel. Is that vote in tension with your call for humanitarian aid?
My public statements then and now are demanding that Israel allow humanitarian aid in. Their explanation is that Hamas is stealing or diverting most or all of the aid that's been let in. And I'll tell you, I believe Jose Andres and World Central Kitchen, Cindy McCain and the World Food Program, and a dozen other leaders of organizations from UNICEF to UNHCR who've told me that, tragically, this is too often the IDF either targeting humanitarian relief efforts or preventing them from getting in.
That wasn't the question, Senator Coons. The question was, is your belief that Israel is blocking humanitarian aid, which of course they are, is that in tension with your continued votes to send weapons to Israel? And of course, right. He doesn't answer the question. So he's going to be asked the question again.
This is a real crisis, and it is hurting Israel's legitimacy and support in the United States and around the world.
The reason I ask if it's in tension is that several of your colleagues who align themselves more along this is sort of the moderate flank of the Democratic Party,
right,
actually voted to stop sending those weapons to Israel,
right,
because of the humanitarian crisis. There is a new Gallup poll which has only 32% of Americans approving of Israel's military action in Gaza.
Right.
But among Democrats, that number stands at 8%. Do Democrats need a fundamental mindset change when it comes to how they think about the relationship with Israel after this war?
Bluntly, I think we need a fundamental mindset change in our relationship with Netanyahu and his leadership. I am not going to walk away from Israel and the ideal of a Jewish democracy in the state.
No, again, he doesn't answer the question about, like, if you believe that Israel's blocking humanitarian aid, why are you still voting to arm Israel? He doesn't answer that. And then he says, okay, fine, yeah, let's change our relationship with Netanyahu. Netanyahu, as if Netanyahu is the problem, even though his entire opposition supports everything he's doing inside of Gaza, right, because he says we need to believe in the ideal of a Jewish democracy, which of course is an oxymoron. Either you're a democracy for everybody or you're a democracy for nobody. And the ideal of a Jewish democracy means you're only a democracy for Jews, which means you're not a democracy.
But also, like, even if, let's just say for argument's sake, the problem is Netanyahu. Now, Aaron, you just explained, and you and I know that that's not the case, that this is a societal problem, that the vast majority of Israelis think that Netanyahu is using either sufficient force or not enough force, and it's an extreme minority that thinks he's using too much force. That still doesn't explain why you would vote to keep funding them. Netanyahu is the prime minister right now. What does that have to do with the existence of a Jewish state?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the bottom line is Netanyahu's brand is so bad because he's, knowingly sacrificing his own captives just to fulfill the goal of destroying Gaza. So Coons has to throw in a line of, oh, yeah, Netanyahu's the problem. When really the problem is people like Chris Coons willing to arm Israel no matter what it's doing and no matter who's in power.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost amazing because his answers are both of his answers are actually indictments of himself. Like, they're both reasons why he should not be voting the way he's voting. He doesn't even know how to make his point effectively. All he's doing is making himself look like a bigger hypocrite.
Yeah, that's a very democratic thing to do. Like, I remember with the Ukraine proxy war, when a bunch of progressives got on board, they were like, people like Cori Bush and Bernie Sanders would be like, yeah, there's we have to be mindful of militarism and NATO expansion, but let's go ahead and give tens of billions of dollars over to the cause of militarism, NATO expansion.
Yeah.
So doing something similar here.
Isn't that Dems? Yeah. Well, for Republicans suck, as I'm sure every single person in the world knows by now, there was a very shocking assassination of Charlie Kirk, the far-right influencer, media star, head of Turning Point USA. He was shot in the neck in Utah while he was giving a Q&A. And it is, I don't know if you saw the video. I actually was trying not to see it. It was on Instagram. I found it incredibly disturbing. I'm not someone who likes Charlie Kirk at all, but it was really violent and awful to see. So how are Republicans, including Trump and several media figures on the right, responding to this? Are they calling for less violence? Are they calling for more cooperation and understanding? No, they're basically calling for war and blaming the radical left for all of the political violence in this country. Let's take a look at what Donald Trump had to say.
It's a long past time for all Americans and the media to confront the fact that violence and murder are the tragic consequence of demonizing those with whom you disagree day after day, year after year, in the most hateful and despicable way possible. For years, those on the radical left have compared wonderful Americans like Charlie to Nazis and the world's worst mass murderers and criminals. This kind of rhetoric is directly responsible for the terrorism that we're seeing in our country today, and it must stop right now. My administration will find each and every one of those who contributed to this atrocity and to other political violence, including the organizations that fund it and support it.
Okay, so here he is saying that rhetoric is dangerous and we have to stop demonizing each other. And then he goes on to demonize the entire left, the radical left. And also something you'll note is that he talks about going after all of the organizations that fund this. So that I'm sure is going to be, you know, as he already has been going after, and as the Republicans and some Democrats have already been going after, you know, Students for Justice in Palestine. We know that Jewish Voice for Peace is considered a terrorist organization by some, including the ADL. So I'm sure he's going to be going after political organizations, maybe the DSA. We'll have to wait and see. But it's especially rich given what he's about to say in this next segment. So let's keep playing.
Radical left political violence has hurt too many innocent people and taken too many lives. Tonight, I ask all Americans to commit themselves to the American values for which Charlie Kirk lived and died, the values of free speech, citizenship, the rule of law, and the patriotic devotion and love of God.
Okay, so maybe the God part, but when it comes to free speech, as we've pointed out on the show many times, Trump is not exactly an activist and champion for free speech as much as he and J.D. Vance pretend to be. I mean, the crackdown on people who are criticizing Israel, the crackdown on pro-Palestine speech, the kidnapping of people who engage in pro-Palestine speech is all an attack on free speech. It's all part of a censorship campaign. So again, this is a kind of the perfect amalgamation of rank hypocrisy from Donald Trump, and he's pretending that he's something that he isn't. He is demonizing others while he's condemning the demonization of others, and it's just a perfect Trumpism. But I also want to point out that, you know, a lot of people, including the people we're about to hear from, are framing political violence as kind of something that the left has a monopoly on. There's no mention of the fact that recently there were 2 Democratic lawmakers were killed in Minnesota by someone who was a Trump supporter. Obviously, there was an attempted assassination of Pennsylvania Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro. There was a series of shootings at the homes of 4 Democratic elected officials in New Mexico. And these are just the recent attacks. Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked. They were trying to attack Nancy Pelosi. People want to hang Mike Pence, etc. So this is obviously extremely selective. But let's take a look at some of the media figures and what they had to say. So first, we're going to hear from Alex Jones, then Steve Bannon, and then Jesse Waters.
We're in a war. The left has been saying put a bullseye on Trump, a bullseye on his supporters.
Charlie Kirk's a casualty of war. We're in this country. We are.
They are at war with us. Whether we want to accept it or not, they are at war with us. And what are we going to do about it?
Response to political violence is calls for war or calls for fighting back. But obviously, these are very provocative calls. Last but not least, let's hear the really moving words of Republican Congressman of Missouri, Bob Onder.
Well, what for us? Well, everything has changed. If we didn't know it already, there is no longer any middle ground. Some of the American left are undoubtedly well-meaning people, but their ideology is pure evil. They hate the good, the truth, and the beautiful, and embrace the evil, the false, and the ugly. And they literally will kill those with whom they disagree, just as their predecessor leftists Marx and Stalin and Lenin and Pol Pot and Fidel Castro did. We must know that.
I love how he throws in all the historic bad guys that the U.S. Doesn't like to connect that to the assassination of Charlie Kirk. But
Right.
If you're going to go to history, I think of the quote from Dr. King that the United States is the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet. And when you're the greatest purveyor of violence on the planet, that's going to reflect itself in your own culture. And it's a very violent culture here. And that's not exclusive to any faction. If this assassination of Charlie Kirk came from someone on the left, then that's deplorable.
Yeah.
But it would be just as deplorable when someone on the right does it. And unfortunately, rather than recognize it, every human life is valuable and that no one deserves to be killed for their political views. Every time this happens, one side just takes advantage and demonizes the other. And it's especially rich coming from the Trump camp, which paints everyone as an enemy.
Right.
And has the kind of rhetoric that we're seeing right there that does demonize people.
Right.
And it's just, I don't know. This is a real, Charlie Kirk, I didn't agree with a single thing I ever heard him say. But of course, this is something everybody should oppose. This is political violence. I just wish, though, that principle that we oppose political violence could be applied to everybody equally. And if it did, then you wouldn't have people cheering on mass murder in Gaza every single day.
Right.
But unfortunately, that's just not where we're at.
Yeah. And I mean, I think also speaking kind of beyond morality, if this is someone on the left, it's an extremely stupid thing to do and to have done because they just handed the right a martyr. Now, I don't know. For all I know, it could be an agent provocateur from the right pretending to be someone on the left.
Well, who knows? Who knows? We'll find out if they catch the assassin. And it's just horrible. And to me, it just speaks to a grim trajectory that this country feels like it's on. But to me, it all starts with the culture itself. Not only that, promotes violence with the proliferation of guns and the lack of regulation of firearms, but also just the violence it exports around the world.
Right. Yeah. Violence, which, ironically, Charlie Kirk was A-okay with as someone who defended Israel. Although he was starting to suggest that Israel, some people are thinking that this is because he turned against Israel, but we'll have to look into that on another episode.
Yeah, I strongly urge everyone to refrain from speculation until you get actual facts.
Right.
I think that's the best course of action always. Okay, let's turn to Isn't That Weird? And check in on Jerry Seinfeld. He has some new insights to share about the movement for Palestinian rights. This is what he said. Via The Hollywood Reporter, Jerry Seinfeld compared the Free Palestine movement to the KKK. And Jerry said, just say you don't like Jews. By saying Free Palestine, you're not admitting what you really think. So it's actually, compared to the Ku Klux Klan, I'm actually thinking the Klan is actually a little better here because they can come right out and say, we don't like blacks. We don't like Jews. Okay, that's honest. So Jerry Seinfeld is offended by people saying Free Palestine because how dare people say that Palestinians deserve to live in freedom like everybody else, to the point where he's willing to say that the Klan is actually a little bit better because at least the Klan, according to Jerry Seinfeld, is a little bit more honest than people who say Free Palestine, which somehow in his mind is a call to kill Jews and really just a call to free Palestinians. I don't understand why that's a hard concept to grasp. So anyway, my response to this was to invoke an old line from Seinfeld. If you watch the show, you might remember the line, these pretzels are making me thirsty. That's a line that Kramer had to say when he got a bit role in a Woody Allen film. So I said, in my best Jerry Seinfeld voice, these Palestinians are making me racist. That's my response to Jerry.
The irony here is, well, okay, first of all, I do want to give a special shout out. And this is so embarrassing, but I do want to give a special shout out to Van Jones, who compared wearing a keffiyeh to holding the Confederate flag. So shout out to Van Jones, this person who claims to be on the left. But, what's so rich about what Jerry Seinfeld does and what every single Zionist who claims that the chant "Free Palestine" is anti-Semitic, or I mean, there's this weird English Zionist who says it's akin to seeing the swastika. All they're doing is creating anti-Semitism, because what would make you angrier at Jews than the claim that Free Palestine is anti-Semitic? Like, it's the worst PR for Jews. Obviously, it's a terrible thing to say in general, but it's just so embarrassing, which is why Jews have to speak out and condemn that, just for Jewish safety. I hate to use that word, but it's true. Like, if the world thinks that all Jews are supporting this live stream genocide, and if the world thinks that all Jews think the cry for Free Palestine is anti-Semitic or KKK-like, we're screwed.
Well, luckily, not everybody in the Seinfeld universe agrees with Jerry on this. A few weeks ago, we interviewed Larry Charles, who was one of the original writers and producers on Seinfeld, and he strongly disagrees with Jerry Seinfeld and spoke about the challenges of working with people like Jerry, who are a big part of Larry Charles' career, who have such abhorrent views. So check out that interview at usefulidiots.podcast.com. All right, what do we have for Isn't That Terrible?
So for Isn't That Terrible, let's hear what Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who we spoke about in Thursday Throwdown, and you should definitely check that out because he's written some very impressive books. Let's hear what he had to say about Israel and Gaza in an interview with the not exactly hard-hitting Richard Engel.
We've got to keep the focus on where it is. There is moral clarity in this conflict. It's not confused. It's not a gray area. Hamas savagely massacred 1,200 people on October the 7th, all civilians. And they didn't just kill them. They massacred them. They butchered them. And they did it in front of their families. They raped mothers in front of their children. They mutilated their bodies in front of their children. They beheaded babies and put old people in wheelchairs on fire. We got to remember what started this. And President Trump.
It's an unbelievable statement. He says in that very short clip, he says 5 things that are false, starting with the fact he says that everyone killed on October 7th was civilian. That's not true. There were a few hundred soldiers and security forces killed on October 7th because they were the targets of the attack. Because again, they were taking part in the occupation of the Gaza concentration camp.
Right.
And that happened on October 7th. And also, not everybody was even killed by Palestinian militants, because we know, because Israel enacted the Hannibal Directive, that Israel at least killed some of the victims of October 7th. So that right there is a lot. And then he gets to the rape thing. So not only now was there rape on October 7th, according to Mike Huckabee, and again, as we've exhaustively talked about, there still is no evidence for even a single case of rape on October 7th, let alone on a mass scale. But then he says that there's rape of mothers in front of their children. That's a new lie we haven't heard before. And then he also throws in the beheaded babies thing. And Richard Engel,
that's an oldie. Yeah, but the new one, I had never heard the people in wheelchairs set on fire before.
That's a new one too.
Yeah. So shout out. He is a prolific writer, so maybe he can write some more historic fiction about what happened on October 7th, given that he is going even beyond the greatest hits, which we've already heard. And let's see, is Richard Engel going to push back on these documented lies? Let's see how he reacts.
Very clear in reminding us, whatever he says about this conflict, he always says, don't forget October 7th. And it's something I feel like that the world needs to not just hear, they need to heed that. Don't forget what happened. Don't forget what precipitated this. And don't forget what has prolonged it.
I was here at the time. I went to many of these kibbutzes. We've interviewed many families. We've certainly focused on the atrocities of October 7th.
He says that he was at the kibbutzim, where these crimes occurred. He basically is co-signing, right? By not pushing back on what Huckabee is saying, he's suggesting that he saw that stuff, right? I mean, there's kind of an implicit embrace of his analysis and his observations, because it's worse than just moving forward with another question. It's worse than just going to the next thing. And yeah, good. I'm glad he's about to say something about how, there's been violence against Palestinians. But by not pushing back on that, and by saying that he was there, it's actually worse, because it implies that he's right.
He knows that everything that Mike Huckabee just told him is false, because he was even there on the ground. And of course, when he was on the ground, he didn't pick up any evidence to substantiate Mike Huckabee's claims, or else Richard Engel would have reported it, right? If he had picked up evidence of beheaded babies or rapes in front of mothers, he would report, but he didn't. So he knows that everything Mike Huckabee is saying is a lie. And instead of telling him that, he says, well, yes, I did focus on the atrocity. So he's trying to suck up to Mike Huckabee, even though he knows Mike Huckabee is lying through his teeth. I mean, and Richard Engel is like the chief foreign correspondent for NBC News. And this is what it takes to be in that position. You have to be willing to just sit there and let someone lie through their teeth to justify a genocide, which is exactly what Mike Huckabee is doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely disgusting. And just imagine someone making unfounded claims and baseless claims, but who was pro-Palestine instead of pro-Israel. Do you think the media would just stand there and be like, yeah, it wouldn't happen? And also this whole idea about how we have to remember where this started and when this started, that's literally all anyone ever talks about in the media and all of our political elites. Like, that's always where it goes back to. It's as if history starts on October 7th. So this idea, the suggestion that that's not already part of the discourse is so ridiculous.
Well, we can expect such blatant propaganda from Mike Huckabee. He is, after all, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, which means he basically works for Israel. But Richard Engel, you're supposed to be somewhat of a journalist. So come on, really, the terrible here goes to you. Mike Huckabee's doing his job. A journalist is supposed to have a little bit more dignity.
Right.
Be a little bit less of a sycophant to Israel. But Richard Engel was not here. So terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Yeah. And those have been your 4 basic food groups. We are so excited to be speaking to, once again, Congressman Ro Khanna, who represents California's 17th District.
Now, a few notes. We recorded this before the assassination of Charlie Kirk, so that issue is not addressed. Now, to get ahead of people who might say, hey, why aren't you challenging Ro Khanna? He's a Democrat. He's in Congress. He has all these views that, a staunch leftist doesn't agree with. Well, we don't really do debates on the show unless it's really, really urgent. And to me, right now, you have the moral issue of our time, which is the genocide in Gaza. And Ro Khanna has been pushing back on AIPAC. He's been calling it out. And I think in times like this, you have to prioritize certain issues. And so personally, I'm prioritizing the genocide in Gaza. And so, yes, I might disagree with Ro Khanna on many things, including, say, the proxy war in Ukraine. I just think it's a time for the focus to be on the moral issue of our time. So this is a very cordial interview with Ro Khanna, who, by the way, is one of the few members of Congress willing even to speak to people to his left, which I think is very admirable and worth acknowledging him for. We also get into his efforts to shine light on the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. He's been joining up with Thomas Massie to call for the release of the Epstein files. And we talk about that and more. So here is Ro Khanna.
Welcome back to Useful Idiots.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You've been spearheading an effort to get Trump to recognize Palestinian statehood. Can you tell us more about this effort and any new developments around it?
Coincidentally, I just spoke at the Council of Foreign Relations this morning. We have 26 signatures to officially recognize a Palestinian state. Now, people say, is this just moral preening? Why does it matter? What is the importance of it? First of all, it obviously matters to Netanyahu, and it matters to AIPAC because they have been very opposed to it. So there is a real value in recognizing the humanity of the Palestinian people and their national aspirations. Secondly, the Palestinians need some hope, a horizon of hope to overcome the destruction and extremism that they are seeing. And third, the reality is that the United States recognizing a Palestinian state, unlike all the other countries, really matters because we have the ability to have consequences based on our aid and our support.
You mentioned that you have 26 signatures. So when you bring this pitch to your colleagues in Congress, what kind of pushback are you getting? What are you hearing from people about why they're not on board with this yet, even though it's supposed to be U.S. policy to support a Palestinian state in just 22% of their homeland?
It's so funny because one of the critiques I got at the Council of Foreign Relations this morning was, what are you saying that's new? Isn't this what we've always been trying to do, which is a Palestinian state, recognizing a secure Israel and 2 states with a Palestinian free and fair elections, 22 Arab states involved. And that's why it shouldn't be that controversial. But the reality is when you have the United States actually do it, it is setting a marker that says if Israel is not then committed to actually taking steps to recognizing a Palestinian state, then there are going to be consequences. And consequences for the relationship. And that is a red line for certainly AIPAC. It's a red line for Bibi. And so members of Congress have been reluctant to get on. 26 is quite a lot and shows that we're building momentum. It probably would have gotten a few years ago. But I think that whether you agree with me or not on two states and recognizing a Palestinian state, it's meaningless if we're not willing to recognize it. Actually recognizing it gives teeth to what the United States policy has been.
The experience of Jamaal Bowman and Cori were basically ousted from Congress by AIPAC, spending more than $20 million around there to get them out of Congress because they supported Palestinian rights. How much of an impact do you think that's had on measures like yours to trying to get just minimal recognition of Palestinian rights?
It's had a chilling effect, but there's been a counter force since my friend Jamaal Bowman lost and since Cori Bush lost. And that counter force is that the famine that's going on in Gaza has really shaken people. And I would say the support that Israel has is dramatically changed in the last 2 months of this year. And so there are more people now getting on Delia Ramirez's bill to stop giving military weapons to Israel and Netanyahu. They're being used to kill civilians. 27 senators supported Senator Sanders. None of that would have happened a year ago when Jamaal, me, and 37 Democrats voted against the $14 billion supplemental to Israel. But it is still a fear because people know they see AIPAC on X attacking me every week. I'm part of a group with Chris Van Hollen and Mark Pocan and Bernie Sanders that they tag. And they know that they have a financial clout. And so it creates a chilling effect. Really, you should have, in my view, 150 members of Congress on this. But people feel also that they could just duck. Okay, if we're not going to go out there and do a full throttle defense of Israel anymore, or speak at an AIPAC conference, but we don't have to go out and support Delia Ramirez's bill or Sanders or Khanna's letter. Let's just duck, and when the war is done, then we can emerge. And that, I think, is unfortunately a prevailing sentiment among a fair amount of elected officials on our side.
I have a question about this letter that you have written. It says, according to The Guardian, that the U.S. will, quote, need to fully recognize Israel and adopt a framework to guarantee Israel's security, including the disarmament of and relinquishing of power by Hamas in order to be broadly embraced by the community of nations. So isn't that already the case? And what are you guys going to demand about security guarantees for Palestinians? And is there any guarantee that they get the right to choose their own government as Israel does? And, since that seems required for self-determination.
Yes, we call for free and fair elections in Palestine. The provision of them recognizing Israel and the secure Israel is the provision that the Palestinian Authority has agreed to. It's a provision, of course, that France and Canada and Australia and many of the 147 nations have called for. It's the framework towards peace. So it would be that we would expect Israel to recognize a Palestinian state, to stop the settlements, to stop the bombing, to work with the United States and the Arab partners to allow for free and fair elections and to have a Palestinian state, and that both sides would face consequences if they violated international law or human rights or violated the sovereignty of those states.
In speaking to your colleagues, is there a recognition of what the polls are showing that the base of the party is now completely against Israel, just appalled at what it's done to the people of Gaza? And how is that tension playing out? The tension between where the donors are, including AIPAC, versus where the voters are?
There is a recognition of dwindling support. You have less people, like I said, who are vociferous in their advocacy for Israel. There would be people who would come up to me on the floor, we would, their own arguments about it. Aren't we more secure today, There's no Nasrallah, there's no Sinwar, Iran's been bombed. Now less people are willing. In fact, one of my colleagues, I was going to say, hey, I'm surprised you haven't criticized my letter privately. And he said, well, right now I'm not in a mood to be defending what Israel is doing. So they definitely have seen the shift, and many are aware of it. And it's led to a silencing of pro-Israel advocacy. But what it has not done is is gotten many to start to speak out for human rights of Gaza, for a Palestinian state, for stopping the bombs going there that are killing civilians. And many are just hoping that they don't have to speak anything about it. So they're not out there promoting Israel, but they're also not willing to criticize them because they know that there is going to be a huge response. I mean, I think there was something AIPAC Tracker does an analysis of different prominent Democrats, and I think of the various ones were being floated around for different national roles. AOC and I were the only two that they said we're not taking or significantly intertwined with AIPAC, and they said, well, we hope that kind of continues to be even more progressive on the issue. But think about that, and so a lot of folks have just said, okay, maybe we can be silent.
You have worked in the past, and you currently are working with Congressman Thomas Massie, and he's referred to AIPAC babysitters, saying that each member of Congress has an AIPAC babysitter. Have you had this experience with AIPAC attempting to babysit you?
You know, I respect Thomas Massie a lot. I'll tell you what it is. I mean, AIPAC has a person in every district that has outreaches to their member of Congress, as do other groups. And I still take a meeting with constituents from AIPAC. I mean, I will take a meeting with anyone. I don't take their money and I don't take PAC money and they criticize me. But, you know, I'm going to the Arab Con in Dearborn and they're criticizing me for doing that. I have been a staunch supporter of free speech and dialogue. But, you know, the problem, I don't have a problem with them having a person in every district saying, come meet constituents in your district. That's the First Amendment political participation. I have a problem with the super PAC money that targets members of Congress. And I have a problem with their philosophical position, which is whatever Israel does, we're going to support. And our view is you don't have agreements publicly, disagreements publicly, you only disagree privately. I just disagree with that.
In July, you and Congressman Thomas Massie introduced the Epstein Files Transparency Act, a bill that has received bipartisan support. Can you tell us more about the bill, what it aims to do, and what its status is right now?
Well, we had good news today, our 217th signature on the bill to release the full Epstein files, and we expect to get to 218 on September 23rd when we have Representative Grijalva's seat filled. The bill says release the files. It's what the survivors want. I mean, we had a press conference. The survivors were so emotional. They talked about being assaulted, raped at the age of 13, 14, about having to recruit other high school students to be abused by rich and powerful men. And these rich and powerful men have never had accountability. The Epstein file release will help bring accountability. It will say that there can't be two systems of justice in America. You can't say that, okay, if you're rich and if you have political context, you get to, with impunity, abuse young girls.
What's your understanding of what's actually in the Epstein files in terms of like the types of documents that we're talking about? Are we talking about client lists? Are we talking about ties to foreign intelligence? There's been all these theories bandied about, but it seems unclear what the Epstein files actually are.
Well, having talked to Bradley Edwards, who's seen the files, he's the victim's lawyers. What he says is that there's no client list, but there's a lot of witness memoranda and interviews, which suggests that there were people Epstein farmed out these underage girls too, and that there are other people who were engaged in this horrific conduct. And there's also evidence of other people, powerful people, rich people who knew what Epstein was doing and turned a blind eye. There's evidence he believes of financial crimes, of money laundering, of financial transactions. And he keeps saying that we need to get the files from the CIA. So that leads me to believe that there is some foreign angle, foreign intelligence angle, but he's not specified beyond that.
Speaking of what's in the files and the revelations, I want to show a picture of Trump's birthday letter to Jeffrey Epstein, which was originally reported on by the Wall Street Journal. Can you talk about the recent release of this letter as well as others that were obtained through the Epstein estate itself? And what do you think its significance is?
Well, I led the effort to get this letter after appearing on Lawrence O'Donnell's show. He had Bradley Edwards, who suggested that we should be getting this birthday book from the estate. The big significance to me, other than the awful crudeness in a mirror of American culture, that of the degradation of women, the big reflection to me is that we just can't trust the White House to tell the truth, that they're still denying that this was a document that he had anything to do with. And this means that we should have a full release of the Epstein files. Look, if there's nothing there, if, as the president says, it's all a Democratic hoax or Democratic exaggeration, then why not just release the files? That would answer the question, and people can determine for themselves if there's something there. The fact that they're not willing to release the files is what's raising all these flags about what is going on.
And you've been attacked over this. For instance, Press Secretary Caroline Levitt had some choice words for you in response to a question from Maggie Haberman. Let's take a listen.
Thank you. Just I want to follow up on something you said. You said the Epstein documents are a hoax that Democrats are perpetrating against the president. You said he didn't sign that check, that he didn't sign the birthday card that he allegedly signed. So what is the theory, since these documents came from the Epstein estate? Who is I guess in your view, faking these documents?
I did not say the documents are a hoax. I said the entire narrative surrounding Jeffrey Epstein right now that is absorbing many of the liberal cable channels on television is a hoax that is being perpetuated by opportunistic Democrats like Ro Khanna and the others whom you saw on that press conference outside of Capitol Hill who are trying to push this hoax against the President of the United States.
What exactly is the hoax? I'm just trying to understand what's fake. What's fake is not the documents.
The hoax is the Democrats pretending to care about victims of crime when they do not care about victims of crime, when they have done nothing to solve crimes, when they have done nothing to lock up child pedophiles and child rapists across the country, and when they are now using victims as political props to try and, again, smear the President of the United States and drag on this bad story about him. It is a distraction. The Democrats view this story as nothing more than an attempt to distract from the accomplishments and the achievements of this administration, and that is what we mean when we call it a hoax.
So what's your response to that, Mr.
I'm used to
Opportunist?
being attacked. I just think it's unfortunate that she's diminishing the survivors. I mean, the survivors were not anti-Trump. Some of them voted for Trump. They wanted to meet with him. They want him to release the files. It's Donald Trump that's made this a Trump issue. If he just releases the files, this issue would go away, and he could take credit for releasing the files. So it's unfortunate to see that them being so defensive.
Do you think that the Democrats have learned any takeaways from their latest loss in the presidential elections? And what for you are those takeaways?
And to hear the rest of the interview, please go to usefulidiotspodcast.com.
That was great. Always love talking to Ro. And make sure that if you are not already a member, you become a member at usefulidiotspodcast.com so you can hear the full interview with Ro, where he expands on his thoughts on Jeffrey Epstein and gets into also what is happening to Medicare and Medicaid.
That's our show. Thanks so much for tuning in to Useful Idiots. We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
And that brings us to the close of today's episode of This Week in Palestine. As always, stay curious, stay courageous, and keep asking the questions that unsettle power and move us closer to justice. I'm your host, Yara Rashid, and it's been a profound honor to share this space with you, a space where truth is spoken without compromise, resistance is honored without apology, and solidarity is never negotiable. If you have reflections, questions, or want to support the work we do, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us anytime at twippodcasts@gmail.com. A heartfelt thank you to our listeners and to the brilliant team behind the scenes who make this show possible. Deep gratitude to Bob Funk, Stanley Robinson, Stephen Lowe, Sophia Rose Wollman, Tahani Abu Mossa, Dr. Rana Awad, Dr. Bethany Marks, Juliette Salame Olivier, Reynad Al-Ghul, and Mohammed Al-Ghul. Your vision, labor, and spirit fuel this platform and keep its heart beating. Until next time, keep walking toward truth. Keep walking toward Palestine. This Week in Palestine is a production of Truth and Justice Radio, proudly broadcasting from WZBC Student Radio at Boston College. Thank you for walking this path with us as we continue the journey toward Palestinian liberation. We'll be back next week. Until then, take care and stay steadfast.